Hey, thanks so much, Alex. Really appreciate it, and very excited to talk to everybody about getting started with Dremio, and mainly really what are customers doing with it, and how are customers getting started, and what are their use cases. And so that's going to be a big element of the focus as we get going and rip into this today. And so we're really going to divide it out. We got Brock here because he's going to run through a demo. We're going to go sort of into the major product stuff, the features, capabilities, et cetera, as we run through the demo. And at the top here, I'm really going to start just sort of setting the stage about like where does Dremio fit in the overall market? How are customers using us? What are those use cases? And we'll sort of do that interchange and drop it in. So if you have questions along the way, we'll get after it. We're also going to have a couple poll questions for you. We really want to understand, what are you guys trying to do? Maybe we can tailor this thing on the fly a bit to what you're trying to do, or come back to you with another episode. The show is going to run every week. It's for the community. It's for you guys. Whatever you guys tell us, we're going to spit back at you to make sure we're getting the information you need. All right, so just really running through this, everyone on this on the show today are sort of attending live here, familiar with this, right? We've been trying to become more data driven as businesses continue to move forward. How have we made that progression? And a lot of this continues to track with performance. How do we actually get access to the data and query it faster? And then how do we get more people to have that access? And then as that's happened, how have we tried to secure it and so forth? And we've really gone through this. And where we fit is in the open data lakehouse movement. We're really coming in after saying, look, we now have all of the performance, most of the functionality, what you could do with a warehouse, but now you have this sort of infinite scale and flexibility from the data lake. And that combination is really what we've been calling the data lakehouse. And our vision is that your data should be in an open format, an open table format, and you own that. And we'll talk more about that later, but that starts to bridge the best of both worlds between, you want the speed and performance and access, and then you also want the scalability and flexibility of the data lake, and that's where the lakehouse fits in. Okay. And this really speaks to these competing data priorities that most teams go through, whether you're on this call and you're directly a data consumer and you're in a business team, or you're a data engineer in a business team, or whether you're an architect or an engineer in a central team. You probably are feeling some sort of this pain, which is the business wants to move faster all the time. They want more access. They want straight up agility. They just want to be able to go, whether that's building a product and they need access to data to build the product, or whether that's building an analytical data mart. In our case, we'd call that a departmental lakehouse, and they're trying to move really quickly. And then on the centralized side, trying to say, well, I got to govern that. I got to make sure sensitive data doesn't go out. I got to make sure that it's secure and our data is encrypted and so forth. And so what a lot of companies are left with when they look at that is something that's sort of like this. I got all this data in all these places. I got all these different business consumers and all these different ways we're trying to use data, between data science, pulling the data, wrangling it, building the models, operating those models, all the dashboards that we're doing, Tableau, Power BI, et cetera, and all the direct data driven applications. And in the middle, you're like, okay, well, how do I do this, and how do I manage all the security risks in the middle of it? And so architectures often look like this. I was just emailing with a customer a couple of days ago, and we were going through their architecture, and their use of Dremio was this massive consolidation of all these ETL jobs you see down here, all these data copies. So it's landing in all these repositories, and then it's getting copied into these warehouses, typically for some sort of performance gain. And then there's extracts and things like that going on top to help for further performance gains. And then you're managing all of that. So every time you want to make a change, it has to cascade through the whole system. And then it's sort of a mess, right? Becomes skyrocketing costs. It's hard to help the business move fast because everything has to go back to an engineer. So that sort of relates to no self-service. Okay. And this is where Dremio comes in. We're really working to bridge that. We started with ease of use in mind from the start. Okay. And that's why we have a semantic layer built into the query engine. That's all part of Dremio Sonar. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And so you can get this unified view of the data. You can open up that access and discovery to all the different business units. It's really easy for apps and dashboards and data science users to connect directly through. All right. And so you don't have to have all these copies everywhere, and you don't need to do all these different, extracts, for example, to manage performance. It all actually just works through our query acceleration technology and a set of other technologies that we built. Brock will go into a little bit more detail as we go through the demo. Kyle. And so where are we really different between, let's say, other data lakehouse providers or other query engines that are on the market? And the first one comes to this focus on ease of use and self-service, which is the business, then the data consumers, they want to be able to move fast and they want to be able to to accomplish their projects, to get the information they need to either make decisions or to build new applications. Okay. And so that starts with a really simple and easy to use interface. It also starts with a unified view of data. And so having the semantic layer built in with the query engine allows us to do that. And then we worked really hard to have lots of different connections. So you can federate queries across, on-prem and cloud. You can federate queries across RDBMS, Hadoop, and cloud, et cetera. And so in some customers that we have really big, where they're managing, dozens of petabytes of data, they have huge numbers of data sources. We'll talk about one of them later. I'm referencing TransUnion right now. All of that comes together, and then everyone on top, all the business users, the applications, et cetera, can go and access that data. And so it enables all these different teams to be able to self-serve. And then obviously, by the way, we have security and governance baked in. So all of that sort of competing priority stuff starts to sort itself out. And I think in a lot of, there's the buzz term around data mesh right now, which I think probably most people have heard about. There's a sort of this technical way to view it in terms of, federated governance of that data. And I think sort of our general view is most organizations are just trying to deal with this. I want the business to be able to move fast and have access. And then we have sort of security and governance on the central side. How do I bridge that most effectively? And that's really where we're focused on, not just building product now, but also our vision as we're going forward to help our customers. The next one's open data. We feel really strongly, I think many organizations continue to be burned over and over because they're basically held hostage by their data. Like someone else essentially has their data and it's your data, but it's in their format. And they say they're going to charge you more money. And then you start paying more money. And obviously that started largely with Oracle. And then that's changed over time to, I think a lot of people are starting to feel that with Snowflake today. And what we want to do is give you choice. You have the choice. So we're based on open standards, like Apache Iceberg, like Apache Parquet. It's your data. And we sit on top of that. And if we're no longer the choice for you, you can move. There's no vendor lock-in. You can use a different query engine. You can use a different technology with your data, but we're not holding your data hostage. We really strongly that's the movement. That level of flexibility is required for organizations to not have to continue to rebuild and migrate and do all this stuff with their data, every 3 to 5 years. And then we can't have a great self-service experience if we don't have world-class performance. So we have sub-second performance. We have a set of query acceleration technologies. Brock will talk more about that in the demo. And we do all of this at 1/10 the cost. Okay, you can imagine if you don't have all these data copies to manage and you don't have all these warehouses to try to deal with performance, well, you don't have to pay for any of that. So those are the things that drop your cost way down, where you just have really inexpensive object storage, such as like S3 or ADLS, and then you're using us on top. That's it. That's the full extent of the architecture. So it simplifies everything down. And because of that, the costs are much, much lower. So let's talk about customers and the use cases that they use us for. So there's a whole wide variety, as you can imagine. We are a data infrastructure technology, and so you can get started in a lot of ways, but there are some common patterns, and they usually fit into 2 buckets. The first bucket is, I got a bunch of stuff today and I want to make it work better. And we'll just sort of say that's the modernization and migration bucket. Okay. And then on the other bucket, there's new projects. And it's like, hey, I want to launch this new application. I need this new functionality. I need a new data mart for customer 360, or I need my quants to be able to get better access to trading data. All of those things happen, and we'll talk through customer examples for each of these. Now, there's even more potential use cases. The ones on the screen or that we're talking about now, these are what our customers actually use us for and start with us for. Okay, so let's jump in. So we'll talk about the modernization piece first. As you can imagine, like there's lots of ways you could start depending on where you are on your journey. And when we talk about modernization, some customers might just say, look, I have all this data on-prem and I'm planning on staying there and modernize. That's not typically what we see. We typically see the modernization with us as some path to migration, whether they are going to move everything to the cloud or whether they're going to move parts to the cloud or whether they're going to move parts to the cloud over a series of years. And with us, you can actually have a seamless experience for modernization starting right away, which is the data where it sits. Okay. So what you do is you bring in Dremio, and then you can use that with HDFS, RDBMS, the data you have in the cloud, if you have any, across all these different data sources. You get that unified view of data, you get the performance acceleration and speed. And we think of that sort of as modern data virtualization. And in the cases where you have Hadoop, HDFS, and you're really, we'll call it your existing on-prem data lake, you're getting a huge performance jump on that right away. And so a lot of customers start to say, like, look, I just need to modernize Hadoop as I think about migration. And then as part of that, they're like, oh, I can connect in SQL Server. Oh, I can connect in Oracle. This is amazing. I can connect in this. And they start connecting all these other data sources. And then they have what, we'll say data virtualization sort of promise could happen. They actually have that. And now customers can query that. They can query it really fast. And we'll talk about some things we do to try to even accelerate queries through systems that are not Hadoop. If it's on premise. And then as customers move forward to that, now they still get the benefits of now this high performance and the self-service analytics. That starts right in stage one. Then in stage two, what ends up happening is they start migrating the data. Okay, and with Dremio, what you can do is you can have Dremiocloud running for your cloud data. You can have Dremio software running on your software. So you now have your compute close to the storage. And then we have a Dremio connector. Okay, so that same view that your customers have in stage one, they maintain in stage two. All of that happening under the covers of the migration, they don't even have to see. It's totally seamless. And so now what you're getting from a data team is you're reducing that infrastructure management cost because you're offloading that to the cloud and you don't have that impact on your users. And then some customers stop somewhere in stage two and they say, like, look, that's where it's going to be. Other ones that say, no, all of this is going to go to, let's say, S3 at ELS, et cetera. And so then they go and they actually have a full Lakehouse running with a relatively simple architecture because they've consolidated to do that. That's typically for many enterprises a multi-year journey. It's totally fine. Again, the customers get to modernize, your data users get to modernize in stage one, and then it starts moving on from there. Okay, and now you have the best of all of it because you have the best performance when it's running out of a cloud object storage. Okay, and there's many other things that customers start to layer on as they get there. We'll talk about that, such as moving in from just open data files to open data tables like Apache Iceberg, which enables even more functionality, brings you to what we'll say is closer to a full lakehouse or warehouse environment on the lake. And then even some additional things that we're doing from an innovative perspective that we'll talk about around managing data as code a little bit later on. Okay, here's one example of the Hartford doing this. Hartford, I'm sure everyone's aware, it's a very, very large financial services institution. And what they ended up doing is say, look, we have all this data in Oracle and Hadoop. Okay, and when we started with, and then like their plan was to move to Amazon S3. And so their plan was say, well, like, okay, that's no problem. You can start with us. And so they started with Dremio. And in this case, this is all Dremio Sonar. And so we come in on top. We're able to rapidly expand the performance of what they're getting on Hadoop. So their business users get happier just from the performance gain. Then we're able to bridge together both Oracle and Hadoop. So now we've changed the access and discovery game. And then we put it all in a really user-friendly environment. So that has led to massive value for them. And then while they do the migration to the cloud, that's seamless to the business user. And in the end, they're offloading management structure or management work because it's going to the cloud, and they're offloading costs because it's going to the cloud. And they're getting even better performance as it goes to the cloud. So that's just one example, really large company doing it. Another one's TransUnion. In this case, again, they have data from more than 90,000 sources and they're managing 30 petabytes. So this is a massive outlay. It was very similar. It's like their Hadoop experience was very slow. And you'll see this a little bit as a trend. And if you're there and you have on-prem data, you probably invested in Hadoop at some point, and that is probably slow with a bunch of different query engines you're using, whether you're doing it with a Apache Drill, which is the case we'll talk about here, or whether you're doing it with Spark, or you're doing it with Presto, Trino, et cetera. You're going to get an order of magnitude performance improvement using Dremio. So it's a logical starting place. And then you can just hook together other data sources and you're off and running. And so as they did that, they were able to empower their analysts with self-service. And you'll see that's a trend that keeps coming back because we have the semantic layer built in. and we have the UI design from the start. And so as you can see here, they got a 5 to 10x performance gain right away. And this is sort of that stage one we'll talk about. Okay, so this is what their architecture looked like coming in. This was a MapR implementation. And so then they built this custom web app called Prama on top of their data lakehouse with Dremio. And that's what they ended up exposing to all their data consumers. And then as they move through and forward in their stages, they're now starting their migration to the cloud. Okay, so what ends up happening is sort of MapR and Hadoop are replaced by AWS and Amazon S3. And then we stay the same, right? Dremio's in there and Prama stays the same. And so they get all the advantages of that migration, but they keep business user continuity and that self-service that they've been able to bring into the company very early on. Okay. JP Morgan Chase is in a similar environment where they said, look, we have Sybase IQ is what they had been using on premise. They wanted to modernize and migrate this. And by the way, this is all in their credit risk department. So this is largely to do with all the analysis around trying to determine like who should get credit and who shouldn't get credit, and other things that they can flag saying, these are different credit products or products we could deliver to individuals. Okay. And they just had a bunch of cost issues, et cetera. And they decided to migrate all of that into a cloud data lakehouse. So they just basically did that all in one motion. And that's Amazon S3 plus Dremio was replacing like a host of other, it's mainly replacing Sybase IQ. And then that provided a significant ROI by just, by replacing that expensive EDW with the data lakehouse. And then sort of lastly, like we also have customers, in this case 7-Eleven, who were already in more of a cloud data lakehouse environment. They had ADLS already set up, all the data was already there. And their starting point was like, hey, we got Databricks and Pinot and Presto, and we're still managing all of this to make Power BI work, and we can simplify that whole architecture. And so this is really around their customer 360. They have 71,000 different convenience stores. There's a lot of different ways they want to pull that information together to create a single view of the customer. They were able to really easily do that with Dremio. Now, they could have, the data was already there in ADLS, but they're able to provide that view using our semantic layer to all of their wide variety of data consumers they have across the business, in this case, through Power BI. Okay, and then as I said, there's a whole set of new projects. I'm not going to cover all of them. We have customers going through each and every one of these. The one that probably surprised me the most, I started at Dremio about 3 months ago, was customer-facing analytics apps. So we actually have a blog out with Tata about a mobile app they built that runs directly on cloud object storage through Dremio, which I think is super cool. We're seeing that more as a trend as that goes through. And I'll talk about probably the most common one, though, is these departmental lakehouses. So in Crowd, it's a business where they're basically working with sports clients on how their fans are engaging, interacting, spending across like all their touch points. And so what they basically had a legacy data warehouse. You could say they argue that they were using that as a data mart. They replaced the data mart with a data lakehouse. And you see like they just get a lot better access to the data. They have more control, security, and governance. Again, Brock will talk a little bit about that in the demo that we have with Sonar baked in to the product already. And that was able to, with the improvements and performance, they were able to increase revenue and loyalty. Merlin Networks. This is a business where they're dealing with digital rights, and so they have to have a lot of data coming in for like who to pay for, different people listening to different music. And they basically had this difference where they had BigQuery and S3. And so they were like, okay, well, we got to get everything on one of these. And they decided to go with AWS. And as they did that, they started to look at Athena. But Athena was really having trouble when they were dealing with large amounts of small queries. Okay. And this is something that we really excel in, high concurrency, high performance, interactive queries. And so when they evaluated us, they came in and they went with Dremio, and it enables them to run this application. It's an internal application that's running directly on data that's brought into Amazon S3, and enables them to help operate their business. Okay, we'll talk a little bit. I'm going to talk high level about the products and ecosystem before I turn it over to Brock. So we keep building out our ecosystems. As you can imagine, like there's parts that we're going to do, but we're not Tableau. right? We're not going to build the BI tool. So we want to be able to have an ecosystem so that you just have connectors to connect into. Same thing with all of the cloud and data infrastructure pieces that you'll see on the bottom. And so we're continuing to build and grow that ecosystem out, and really all of the main providers that you'll work with across we'll say the data analytics ecosystem, we have as partners. And then we have two main products. We have Dremio Sonar and Dremio Arctic. And Sonar is really our Lakehouse engine, right? This is where it has our simple UI, it has our semantic layer, and it has our SQL engine with query acceleration technology. And then on Dremio Arctic, this is still in preview. This is our new product coming out where it enables customers to manage their data as code. It does automatic data optimization, and it has a data catalog. Okay, and we'll talk about both at a relatively high level. And then again, in the demo, Brock will go into Sonar a bit more. So this is what Dremio Sonar looks like. So again, just to reiterate, we have a bunch of ways to connect into BI tools, notebooks, and editors. This is ODBC, JDBC, REST, Aeroflight. So again, Aeroflight is what you'd use if you have Jupyter Notebook and you're writing Python and you're trying to query the data and all these sources through Python. We have an intuitive UI. Our SQL runner is awesome. Brock will show you that. And then we have a lot of different functionality that analysts can do or other consumers can do from a no-code perspective, such as like you can create calculated columns. We have a whole space where you can share data and work in a collaborative environment. And so that's all baked in. We have the semantic layer. So you get this unified view of data in business terminology that the business can actually understand across this huge broad range of data sources. All right. And then we have a built-in data catalog that also has data lineage. That's all part of the semantic layer. And then we get into the query engine, where a lot of people are like, oh, it's a query engine. Well, it's a lot more than a query engine because of the way that we focus on the UI and that overall experience, and because of the semantic layer we have built in. And then, so we use Arrow. It's downloaded 70 million times a month now. It's for vector-based execution. It is really, really fast. It's the highest performance core of an engine that you can have. And then we do accelerations on top of that using something called data reflections. Brock will talk to you a little bit more about that. And then we're able to federate those queries across all these different data sources. We've also done some things around multi-engine architecture, workload management, et cetera, to make the experience even better and more efficient and faster. And then we have a way to read a wide variety of data. So we can read from Iceberg and Lake. We'll talk a bit about with Iceberg, we can also do DML and all these write operations. And then from a file perspective, Parquet, ORC, JSON, CSVs, and then we also have ARP connectors. And then on the right-hand side, this is what we're talking about. We have security and governance built in. We have RBAC, we have fine-grained access controls, authentication, auditing, and query history. That is all within Sonar, and that's why our customers are getting so much value, and we're seeing so many use cases explode with Dremio. Okay, on the Iceberg side, this is what's going to enable, if you're going into Iceberg from an open table format perspective, the other table format that's out there is Datalake. Okay, and what we're seeing right now is from a read-only perspective, you'll see we support both of them. We know companies are going to figure out which one's the best for them. But what we've seen with Iceberg, which is Apache Iceberg, it's the Apache open source project, is that we have more contributors, okay, going in, and that we're seeing a much diverser range. The people who are contributing to Apache, it's far more diverse. And so this is actually what it looks like from the data perspective is people like Netflix, Apple, AWS, Tabular, ourselves, like we're all in this helping Iceberg, develop and grow very quickly. And so on the Delta Lake side, you have Databricks. So it is our belief that Iceberg is going to become, it's going to become the open source format, the standard. And so you'll see that we have a sort of Iceberg first mentality in terms of a lot of the different write operations and other functionality that we're building into Dremio. If you have more questions about Iceberg, it's a hot topic right now. We have a lot of content on our blog about it, and we'll be doing additional sessions. Alex is super involved. We're very involved in the Iceberg community overall, and we'll talk about well, I'm just talking about it now. It's important if you want to get into the right functionality and into managing data as code with Arctic, that you would have Iceberg as table formats. And we're going to make that super easy for customers to have their open files turned into Iceberg tables. Okay, here's just an example. You can do record level data mutations, automatic partitioning, instant schema partition evolution, time travel, all through the use of Iceberg with DML. So it's insert, update, delete, any of these engines. And so if you want to use that functionality that is available in Sonar, you need to have the data within Iceberg tables. Okay, DremiOArchitects, something also that you need to have Iceberg tables for right now, is this is really going to become the easiest way to manage your data lake. Okay, and that really starts with managing data as code. And so you think about, a lot of people out there thinking about data products, like how do I create data products? How do I create, these hubs or sandboxes, if you will, for all the different business teams, which really is a branch, right? You can think of it as a branch off the main core where you can bring in data and then it can get checked in and then it can be merged back through. There's a huge amount that goes into governance and security and flexibility. And so as we're trying to bridge those divides between, access and control, and businesses can bring their own data in and all of this, but also being able, access and agility, but also sort of the security and control, all of that comes together, right? All of that can come together with data as code. And so I think this is a big game changer for how organizations are going to look at sort of creating that environment within their organizations. Obviously, too, I guess you're going through and you have all these tables, you want to be able to optimize them. And so we will actually do that automatically. So we'll do automatic data optimization through your Iceberg tables. And then you need a catalog to manage the whole thing. And so we have a data catalog that's all baked into Arctic. And this whole set of features is really designed to just make managing the Lakehouse very simple, improve data quality, improve governance, et cetera, through the whole process. Okay, this is what it looks like. Like I talked about the pieces, but just so you can see a little bit more of what's in there. On the, I'll actually start at the top here. There's branches, tags, and commits. Again, everything you just think about it like Git for data. On the catalog side, you have a unified view of tables. We have data lineage, table views, hierarchies, data discovery. That's all in the catalog. On the governance and security side, similar to what we talked about with Sonar, fine-grained access controls, audit commit histories, and then on the operations side, automated data optimization, garbage collection, data ingestion. Okay, and this is a little bit more sort of going into data as code. Again, it's a Git-like experience for the data lake. So you have data version control, and then on the other side, you have data branching. Okay, and this just enables a huge amount of, we'll say, innovation to happen in data management.